Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at BTB World. While the country is preparing for the elections that are coming up next month, there is of course a lot of economic concerns that had gripped the country for quite some time now. But we've seen some positive news coming in with the first review earlier also being successful with the IMF of the standby arrangement, and now the $700 million tranche that has been received by the State Bank of Pakistan, and they have confirmed it. And this is an important step, not just in terms of our own reserves, but also in terms of the confidence that not only local but also international investors put in the country. This is still a tough time for the country, with a lot of economic experts calling for continuity of the tough decisions that the government has taken, and also crediting the government with the kind of tough negotiations that has actually enabled this in the first place. At the same time, we will also be concerned with regards to preparations for the next EFF program with the IMF, and what sort of policies or measures are going to be taken into account or planned at this moment before we actually go to that point. However, there is of course the big elections in between, which may cause some difficulty with the continuity of policies. But how exactly does the caretaker setup or the decision makers of the country plan to ensure that that is not the case, of course, remains to be seen. Planning for this should have begun a long time back. Whether or not that actually is the case, of course, we'll be talking about further in the program today. At the same time, we're also going to be taking a look at what it means in terms of the different political parties vying for the top spot in the elections next month, since they will be controlling the reins with regards to the kind of financial decisions that the country makes. And so it's very important who will be in the leadership position, not just at the federal level, but also, of course, in terms of those that will be heading the financial division of the country. We've seen previously numerous examples take a different course according to their own expertise, but what exactly is needed, especially in terms of what we have seen has been successful with the IMF. In the same line, we also saw that PML-N's Ishaq Dar recently gave an interview in which he highlighted a number of issues regarding the economic situation of the country, also talking about previous measures taken by the PML-N in its previous tenures, claiming that it is possible for the party to be able to take the country out of its current economic crisis. They also talked about how this is going to be something that will be important for the PML-N, and is confident that they will be winning a two-thirds majority. Whether or not there will be a necessity in terms of ensuring the continuity of policies and the strict reforms that are needed for the economy of the country, of course, remains to be seen. We'll also be touching upon that in our first segment. Our next one is going to take a look at the situation going on in India, which takes a look at the involvement that Indian state has had previously in terror financing, something that Pakistan, of course, has highlighted on various platforms, but something that has also been highlighted by international countries and bodies that have outlined various accounts and families that have associated links with people with suspicious accounts and with suspicious activity. This, of course, is concerning, especially in terms of the FATF review. That is also something that Pakistan has repeatedly called for in terms of action to be taken against India. At the same time, we also have human rights organizations such as Amnesty International calling for considerations of the kind of violations that exist under the garb of FATF recommendations against minorities, particularly within India, that are targeted just under the guise of investigating terror financing within the country. So we're going to be taking a look at how exactly will all of this be factored in the next FATF review, and whether or not this time around these measures will result in some sort of consequence for the country. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we will also be joined online by senior economist, and he has already joined us, Dr. Khaqan Najeeb. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan, for being part of the show, as always. And I'll start with you. Congratulations, of course, firstly on the good development of getting the $700 million tranche in the country. But at the same time, of course, I'll request your very insightful perspective in terms of how much is this a cause of celebration, especially in terms of the current state of affairs and the next course of action.
You know, whenever we've spoken with all of us four, I've always said that Pakistan being with the IMF is the best stance you could take to not only stabilize the economy, but also see some macroeconomic stability that is visible locally to the markets as well as internationally. If you look at the situation today, not only did the $706 million come from the IMF, but today only, UAE also rolled over $2 billion of debt that was due to UAE in January for another year. that is the perspective one should be very clear about, that it's not only the IMF funds that matter, but what matters is the fact that with the IMF come all the other funds that are required for Pakistan to make, as Pitafi Saab always remembers that I say, $25 billion of monies in terms of rollovers, refinancing, commercial, bilateral, and multilateral monies that have to flow into Pakistan. Then I just look at this. On 20th June 2023, Pakistan's reserves were $2.9 billion, and people were, discussing, default-like scenarios. Pakistan stock market was at its lowest. Pakistan bond due in April 24 was trading at half the value it is trading today. It was yielding 100% at that time. Now, the biggest macroeconomic stability factor that has come through is Pakistan's reserves, alhamdulillah. When the next State Bank reserves figure comes out, will be about $8.5 billion. So from $2.9 billion all the way to $8.5 billion in just 6 months. Your rupee has strengthened. Your inflation still high, but has, I think, plateaued out, and it's at the at a level which is, one would say it has probably at, we are passing through the highest level. There is some fiscal consolidation that you can also see happening in the country. So overall, that's been the effect. The other biggest effect, of course, is that the current account deficit, which stood at $800 billion in the first 6 months of the last financial year, has come down to, stood at $3.6 billion, has come down to $800 million in the first 6 months of this fiscal year. So we have been able to manage the current account. Of course, the IMF adjustments, and couple that with the fact that the administration played the role of controlling smuggling, hoarding, Afghan transit trade, and de-dollarization. And all the adjustments that came with the fund, and what you see today is not only macroeconomic stability reflected in the Pakistan Stock Exchange, but Pakistan's bond trading abroad as well. So all in all, a good scenario. Pakistan has done the first review. The second review numbers would be due on the data of 31st December. I'm hoping that the authorities are well aware of this fact, and considering this fact that the government is well aware of the need for keeping the economy with the fund and comfortably sailing through this time. I'm hoping that they would have met all the quantitative performance criteria, the indicative targets, the structural benchmarks, and the next review would be due sometime in February, when we get to the end of about $1.2 billion that are due from the fund as the last tranche. I think that's the overall scenario of the fund. Let's hope that the commercial funds that went back of about $5 billion when we were not with the fund will also come through in the next 6 months, so that when we end sometime in June, our reserves would be closer to a double-digit figure.
Right. Dr. Saab, I'm glad that you're talking about this. Let me ask you, I'm sure that you have watched, Ishaq Dar's interview. There were three takeaways for me. One, if the party wins, he's going to be the finance minister again. Two, if he's finance minister, he's probably going to stick to the reform agenda. Three, going to IMF is perhaps not a done deal. Perhaps Pakistan might not go there. Now, your take of that interview, sir.
Saab, I think your future thinking is very valid. How does Pakistan now move into the future? So let's see what the options are. The next year also, we need $25 to $30 billion of funding that is needed to have gross external financing need of Pakistan, the debt money, the markup, as well as the current account. Does Pakistan have a choice not to take the fund along? In my opinion, Pakistan needs to transition from the current standby arrangement And remember that this is not an EFF facility. This is not an extended fund facility. This is only a facility that kind of bridges Pakistan in the 9 months. Pakistan needs a more structural program with the IMF. I think the best course of action, one transition on February 8th, the second transition Pakistan must prepare for is the transition sometime in March, April, when the new government, the new setup comes in, and the establishment, the political parties, the civil bureaucracy all should be on one page that Pakistan's only stand is to move into a new program. And that program should be designed, should be, managed. Again, my humble submission is designed from now onwards by a local team of energy sector, of financial sector, of fiscal reforms, monetary reforms, and structural reforms of the economy. If we again delay, we have seen many a times that whenever Pakistan has tried to delay a program, whether that was in 2018, 2019, whether that was the ninth review which didn't get completed in June, Pakistan has had to suffer in terms of, the exchange rate gyrating, the foreign exchange plummeting, and the confidence of the international investor waning in Pakistan. I don't think Pakistan has that choice. It would be harder for the nation to take the ride without the IMF than it would be to stay with the IMF and pass through. That would be my humble suggestion to the new incoming government. I hope they are preparing for it. That's something that we still have to see.
Yeah, Dr. Khaqan, talking about the new coming, government, obviously in future, after the elections, they would be coming back. Earlier, you highlighted a very important point, and that was related to, of course, in January 2023, we were sitting at around 2.8 billions in reserves. And of course, you categorically highlighted 6 months of efforts of Pakistan, especially the current finance minister. She has her input. At the same time, different institutions, Pakistan Army as well as other institutions, they played a pivotal role in obviously stabilizing dollar not coming out of Pakistan and going somewhere else, docking somewhere else. Can we say that the current policies, including FISC, all of these policies, they need a certain time to be followed? Even if there is a government change, the next upcoming government, they must be following all of these policies so that the current stability can be a continuous stability so that we can overcome all of the economic challenges in the coming future?
After we make the transition to the IMF, the whole of government approach would be required to create a budgetary framework which is fiscally prudent, which reduces our fiscal deficit, which has been running nearly 7 to 8% over the last 3 years. And if you put in the 2% fiscal deficit that the SOEs make, a country cannot be run on 10% fiscal deficits. So Pakistan has to very now seriously decide that the SIFC framework of a whole of government approach, getting all the provinces on board. And there has been some discussion, and I hear a figure near 129 billion rupees of projects that were with the federal government of the devolved subjects with the provinces have moved through the SIFC to be moved to the provinces. So Raj Sahab, yes, the SIFC framework of whole of government approach has taken this important step in correcting the fiscal framework on the federal level, which is very, very desperately needed to be corrected. I think similarly, other issues, whether those are related to the energy sector, to the privatization, to the deregulation, to getting investment in the country, all need an impetus, all need coordination, all need implementation. Raj Sahab, I've always said, in Pakistan, implementation is a matter of coordination. I think SIFC is trying to play that role. It's unfortunate to say that BOI has not been able to play the kind of role that we needed to get foreign direct investment in the country, which over the last 10 years has stood at around at 1.5 billion to about $2 billion, a figure that one is not comfortable with. Again, some better news is that in the last 6 months, we've seen about a 35 to 36% increase in the FDI to Pakistan, net FDI, compared to what it was over the last 6 months in the corresponding period. Still a very paltry figure, but some increase. So all these policies, along with the IMF, along with the budgetary process, which will become effective, as soon as the new government comes in, and the parliament taking some, deep changes in the budget on the expenditure side, as well as, moving on the fiscal of the taxation side, on the real estate, on the retail sector, on the agriculture income tax. I think the whole of government approach would be required if we want to move forward in a much, much more positive manner than we have over the last decade or so. Then SOEs, their privatization would become pivotal.
Right, Dr. Khaqan, you've mentioned the whole of government approach, and of course, as we talk about the elections, and specifically also what the PML-N leader has earlier mentioned of being confident of a 2/3 majority. Of course, that may be the party's position or what they are targeting towards, but that certainly is not something that we can say with surety at the moment if anybody will be able to do that. So when we talk about the kind of government that we'll be witnessing after the elections, and when we talk about continuity of policies and the role of SIFC, how do you think that all of this will be then coordinated and will be able to play that role of ensuring that those policies are actually implemented? Do you think that it's absolutely necessary for the government to be strong as well?
And Dr. Saab, could you also add, because we are talking about SIFC, this whole report that Pakistan has in principle agreed to international arbiters rather than local ones when it comes to agreements with various foreign investors?
So, Sana, your point is very important that any time there is going to be elections, and about 53 elections are going to be held in the world this year. Everyone's answer, whether it's our neighbor next door, whether there are countries in South America, the US itself. So the world is going through 2024 as a big election year. Wherever there are elections, there are uncertainties. So Pakistan, in that sense, is no different. But what we are seeing today is that the three major parties are going to be contesting this election. Two on their kind of agenda, on their ticket. The third one in a different manner. Then there are the independents. I don't think the nation is not prepared for a coalition government. A coalition government may be in the offing. But that coalition government also, I think, in most of the people that I talk to, have a sense of things that the economy is in the red. There is some stabilization that has happened, and we can't let the fruit of what has happened over the last 6 months go away. So in that sense, I'm a bit more comfortable. I think on the IMF now we are trying to kind of create a consensus that is the way forward and everyone should come on board. On the SIFC, I think the PDM, there were 13, 14 parties which were together when they set up the SIFC. The SIFC came into being when some of the coalition partners would again be in the government when February 8th elections take place. So they should be quite comfortable with the SIFC approach of implementing a whole of government approach in the coming years to move Pakistan forward. So where there is uncertainty, there are some certain steps, the IMF, the SIFC, the PDM having done that, and a general realization of an economy in the red. So I think that gives me a bit of hope. And once we are in an IMF framework, the SIFC is taking a whole of government approach, and the political parties are more geared towards doing more structural work this time in terms of privatization, deregulation, FDI. Things would look, I think, a bit better than they did in the past 10 to 20 years. I use the word bit, being conservative, but I'm hoping that things would look even better. And if they don't, I think rule the next 5 years would not be easy, because muddling through Pitafi Saab is not an option anymore. Being fragile is not an option anymore. We have, think, past that stage of muddling through, picking up monies here and there. Now the country looks forward to our leadership, our establishment, our civil bureaucracy, our technocracy, that they should deliver on some of these agendas, where macro stability in terms of fiscal prudence, in terms of inflation coming down, in terms of a reserves build-up is quite clear, so that we can then move to a growth. On the international arbitration, FIFC, I think, has tried to find a better pathway for Pakistan, because it is quite difficult, and Pakistan has not done well in some of the international arbitrations. So grounds before we go there have been set up. But FDI will come once we pass this 8th February. I know there is talk on Recordec. I know there are projects on the corporate agriculture sector that we want to move forward on, and we should. And some of the numbers, as I said, there is a 36% increase in the first half of FY24 compared to the first half of FY23. So we are starting to move in that direction. We cannot let that direction go astray. Your current account deficit, whatever amount that is, needs to be filled in not only by debt-creating instruments but by non-debt-creating instruments. FDI, remittances, and exports are Pakistan's non-debt-creating instruments that we must follow. So I think that is the future. I'm a little hopeful today. After talking to a lot of people, it gives me hope that the realization of the severity of the challenge is certainly there, and the realization to meet that should hopefully come with a good team coming in.
Right. Dr. Khaqan, can you also comment on what sort of projections you think are there for the kind of global challenges that we'll face, or where the global economy is heading towards? That also is, of course, Pakistan's concern.
Sana, I'm really glad that you brought up the global economy. So here I'm a little more hopeful. So here's my take. I think the U.S. federal funds rate is going to take a downward slide moving, if not March, May onwards, and what we will see is a number of downward adjustment to the policy rate, as we call it in Pakistan, which is the federal funds rate in the U.S. If the federal funds rate moves in this direction, considering that inflation has gone down, what we will see is the global economy is going to stay resilient as it has. The global consumer has stayed resilient despite the fact that there has been a 5.25% hike in the U.S. U.S. being one of our bigger trading partners, that gives me a kind of hope that our exports would continue to be all right. The GDP figures on the Chinese for the year I just saw have come out to be 5.25%. Again, that's good GDP growth. So both of the big nations are doing all right. Europe is still, I think, slow, but as inflation comes down, and I think we need to start living with a bit higher inflation than the target rate of around 2% that the global economy has seen. So we are in an era where we will live with slightly higher inflation, but the rates would start to go down, and the economic resilience, even with the higher rates that the economies have seen, would see kind of better growth in the second half, and that should be the time Pakistan should also be thinking of higher exports, not only of textiles, not only of leather goods, not only of IT and ITES services, but also on the agriculture side, as the work that is now being done under the land information management systems, the LIMS setup, tries to pick up on the productivity of the Pakistan agriculture sector.
Right. Dr. Saab, you actually spoke about Europe and its growth. So there's a debate going on regarding France's growth versus Germany's growth. It looks like France is actually looking up at this moment. It is getting better, and there is need for reform in Germany. What is your take? I just wanted to clarify that position. I wanted to understand, how do you see these major engines of growth within Europe doing in the coming days?
So you're right, Pitafi Saab. So Germany is in a technical recession. A technical recession is when there is 2 quarters of negative GDP. And I think Germany is in a technical recession. Again, you are right, absolutely. Germany is an engine of growth, from the BMWs and the Mercedes and all the goods that they export, because the global markets have been on the slower side. But as the rates go down and the economies pick up, I think the second half would start looking better for Germany as well. Paris has, of course, avoided such a recession and have slowed down, but not to the extent that the other economies have. Again, my take is that the second half would be better than even the first half of 2024. The recovery would begin more so in the US, and then, I think Europe would follow.
Dr. Khaqan, very quickly, is this the Ukrainian factor that obviously, I mean, we saw that France, it distanced itself from that conflict, whereas if we look at Germany, it is all, inside it. Can we say that?
Global exogenous shocks, as we call them, the global commodity price shock, the Ukraine war, the Gaza conflict, the Red Sea difficulties, they all have cast a shadow on the global economy. But it is seeming that the consumer has stayed still resilient. There were saved monies from the COVID times that people have spent. And so, of course, the nations which have stayed away from the conflict or from, being part of the conflict have probably done better. That could be so. But where there was more resilience, because here the consumers drive the economies. So in that sense, I think maybe possible that Paris has been like that. But the 2024 is a more hopeful year. The last 2 months of the stock exchanges in the US have shown a stellar performance. And my last comment would be the stock exchanges are a forward-looking barometer in these economies. And what they have shown in November and December in very, very high performance movements, that the economies next 12 months are going to look better than what they have in the past 12 months.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. That's the end of our first segment with reference to the economic situation of the country and what sort of measures need to be taken by the government and what is going to be expected to follow this year. Our next one is going to focus on the situation in India, especially with regards to terror financing and the FATF review. And this is, of course, something that Pakistan has highlighted previously as well. And not just Pakistan, of course, other international bodies have also related suspicious accounts and activity with Indian state involvement. And Faisal, when we look at the situation, it's not the first time that this is being brought up. Of course, the FATF periodically reviews the situation. However, we haven't really seen the kind of linkage being established with what we have put forward as evidence of involvement of Indian state authorities in terror financing and the kind of review that needs to be followed. Why is that?
Sana, obviously, if we look at India, the kind of things that should be applied, or the mechanisms that should be applied by FATF, I mean, they are quite lenient on it, but still they are highlighting the facts, the ground facts from within India. I mean, if we talk about terror financing, if we talk about freedom of expression, press freedom, all of these things, they are looked into, and we can say that the pressure is being applied on India. At the same time, when we can say that diplomatically pressures are being applied on India as well, because they have been utilizing wrong means to achieve their goals. I'm highlighting the factors of Khalistan leadership getting murdered in the Western countries, and of course it is being funded by India as a government, India as a state. It is being funded by them, because the people who were involved in that kind of illicit money being offered, their evidences are obviously out there, and them evidences, they are not just captured by a normal person or just an individual. They are captured by a government, and I'm talking about Americans. They have captured it, and that these are the evidences that can never be denied. The facts are there. They will be utilized in coming days. But when it comes to media's freedom, and if we talk about the freedom of expression, I mean, what kind of things have been followed by the current regime in India? It was disastrous. If we talk about Kashmir, I mean, in Kashmir situation is entirely different. In Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, what they do is they set the examples of likes of Shujaat, that journalist who was obviously talking against India, he was simply murdered. But when you come towards within India, the voices which were going against the government itself, BJP's government, them voices, they were put to halt or put to silence through different means. If we talk about Rana Ayub, her Twitter account, it was very active because she's got millions of followers. Her Twitter account is still banned in India. By the way, my Twitter account and her Twitter account got banned on the same day, same time. Still, our Twitter accounts are banned in India. They can't be seen.
If we talk about different reasons,
similar reasons.
I am shadow banned all over.
Yes, similar reasons. Muhammad Zubair, if we talk about him, he's someone who had his own, web pages, and he's been bringing up the best of the stories, and the stories he's been highlighting. At the same time, he was bringing in the fake news as well, the news that was creating troubles within India, and that fake news, he was highlighting it, that these news which are being highlighted throughout India, they are actually the fake news which go against the minorities and all of that. And he was banned. And at the same time, if we talk about different other names, I mean, NewsClick is one of the news portals that was, of course, the offices were raided. So all of these actions to silence the saner voices coming out of India, they were of course silenced, and they were raided, the places were raided. All of these actions, they actually go against India as a state, and I am pretty much sure that looking at all of these evidences in coming future, something tangible would be coming out of FATF's probe of India.
Right, and Farrukh, previously, of course, these probes have been held and reviews have been done, and there are a number of recommendations that the FATF also provides. And while at the same time we want to have a proper scrutiny of what is going on, it is also seen and highlighted by human rights organizations such as Amnesty International that these recommendations have also been abused by Indian state authorities to then target minorities under the garb of investigating terror financing. Yeah. And while this is being highlighted by these human rights watchdogs, this, of course, is something that should also be factored in the way that the FATF then looks at the way their own recommendations are applied, or what sort of effort the state authorities have made, and whether or not it's being targeted in the right direction. Is this kind of scrutiny being done by the FATF?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. First of all, I wanted to comment on what my brother Faisal said. He said that saner voices are being silenced. With due respect, my take is, and I know I sound very pessimistic, that all these sane voices have already been silenced. Though now who are being targeted are the mavericks, a few outliers who are trying to still keep on breathing. So that is not going to change. I think that kind of control is not going to go away. Regarding FATF, Sana, FATF has two mandates. One, to actually check the terror financing. The other one is money laundering. So 4 years ago, when we got FinCEN leaks, we saw that at least $1 billion came out of India's banks and went to shady or shoddy places, right? That is one thing. Then when we were going through the FATF's audit, at that time what was happening, if you want to know how broken India's internal economy is, how many safeguards are missing, you just have to read their domestic news, or for that matter watch their movies, because there you will repeatedly, in my life, I heard Hundi and Hawala, these two words from Indian films. Otherwise, I did not know what exactly are those. So that kind of things are going on. So for FATF, it is a juicy proposition where they can really crack down. But here's the thing, Sana. Remind me, where is FATF's headquarters based? It is based in Paris, right? And who is coming to India's National Day at this time? President of France. So India has humongous diplomatic influence, financial influence as well. That's why I think FATF will continue to, particularly the technical side, will continue to do what they're doing. But frankly, because the end result is always diplomatic, there's a board, that board has various countries, those countries actually vote, and that can be lobbied. So India will get out of it very comfortably. But I think that those people in the technical side, on the technical side, they will continue to actually keep on probing, and 2 years, 3 years down the lane, I think it is going to create problem for India.
Kudos, Farrukh, because you have highlighted this factor, because I know that 25 of the Rafales, more Rafales were ordered by India from France. So obviously, you know.
That is unfortunate, of course, that there's so much political cloud that is impacting these decisions. But of course, we are going to be highlighting whatever evidence is there. And Pakistan, of course, has done that previously as well and will continue to do so. And we hope that that does cause some change. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for being part of the debate. That's all we have from the show. See you tomorrow.